and we might be away.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Look at me. Welcome back to 2023, Derek. I've got a bit of echo
Yeah,
going
absolutely.
on, so I've sorted that out. Yeah, it's.
Sort that out.
Did you have a decent bit of a break and a bit of a recharge?
Yeah, it was and probably a bit of an experience that's probably a little bit aligned with our whole people, purpose, place thing, which was, going away with the family to Tassie.
Yep.
Which was great, and also some really good learning components to that. Obviously going away with 3 generations.
Yep.
You sort of get to see everyone different speeds and also get to experience everyone's unique perspective on stuff as well, which was really quite interesting, reflecting back on that. And, Tassie's just a fantastic part of the world. So it's definitely one of the, I've been to a few places over the last couple of years where I sort of went, hey, look, I could probably take it or leave it. But Tassie is definitely one of those spots where I go, wow, I could go back to that in a flash. Beautiful environment, beautiful. Everything's quite quaint and country-like, and it's a so it's definitely one of those places I could easily go back to. What about yourself?
Yeah, I had some of those fat conversations, which has been good. Probably led into Christmas with a high degree of fatigue with moving house, so that was sort of got me pretty flat towards the end of the year, and and not a real long break with parents and brothers, but 3 days of quality conversations, too much food, too much drink, and so probably recharge. So that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, we're only having that conversation today about one of those books I've been reading about, when people talk about, what makes them happy, above a certain amount of money, and with, reasonable health, then it all comes back to this idea of realistically being about, connection and how we all connect as a group. So,
spend time
getting that
in your relationships. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so was definitely good fun.
Yes.
But yeah, you can't keep eating and drinking at that rate for all of your days. It's that's gonna leave a mark.
Yes.
So that was it was just really good fun. And some of that perspective stuff, I started those conversations. You've probably been doing it a little longer within your family. But we've crossed the initial bridge to, hey, this is what housing could be as opposed to how we imagine it today. And even that was just really interesting. My folks love me to bits, I'm sure, but they have generally not comprehended the work that we do.
Yes.
And so sitting down and hearing them and seeing them cottoning on to the start of the journey is very cool. So if an old dog can learn new tricks, anyone can learn new tricks.
Yeah, and I don't know whether Colby's there in the background, but that might even be a good segue to play before we get into the check-in question. Just while it's probably relevant, is maybe just to play the video on the Christmas message that maybe anyone who's listening might also be aware of. Hey, this is something that we're both trying to attempt to do, and maybe others should do to their immediate family group or friend group or whoever. Just be conscious of these moving parts. So I don't know whether Colby can play the Christmas video there if you can find it.
Sorry to get real, but it is an important time for family. Why not send an open letter to your family about what the future might look like and how it's important for you to discuss your plans?
Why? Well, we know that 80% of people who end up in aged care didn't make that decision themselves. Let that one sink in.
Yeah, gets you thinking.
It does. It's a powerful message. And, some of those, as you mentioned about talking to your parents and trying to get the message across of exactly what the hell are you two, or, you 3 or 4 lunatics out there doing. And, we work, we struggle to work on how did that conversation go. And that's, a powerful footnote to what we're saying is this is what's really happening in the background as well. So, and I think that's even, mentioning that is also worth mentioning that we're 2 amigos tonight. Christine is getting over the Christmas spirit as well as having a few little health issues over the break.
Yeah.
And we appreciate she's here in spirit. And certainly hope to have her back in the episode as soon as she feels up to it.
Yeah, absolutely. She's a rock star. So when she's available, will be great.
Absolutely.
Yep. So we wanted to jump into the check-in question for tonight, sort of.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with the new year starting, is People Purpose Place needed more or less, Darren? What are your thoughts over your Christmas period example?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the need for what we've been talking about is certainly any less. I think the hard part is, for me, and some of the ponderings over the break was around exactly how do we make sure that everyone understands that. I mean, we continue to see more and more and more and more reasons why the concepts we're working on with People Purpose Place are more required. We know that housing prices are continuing to slump. We know that interest rates are going up. We know that affordability and things like inflation aren't under control. We know all of those things, and they're the big ticket stuff that everyone hears about. I was only speaking to Hunter, one of my sons, just recently, talking to one of his mates, a young couple looking to go out and find a rental property in a regional place like Townsville and, start your checkbook at $450 a week to try and find a 3-bedroom thing. But I still am, it's still resonating more to me that, and this is the bit that's obviously hardest to communicate, is that the biggest thing that People Purpose Place can do is to fill the void that is happening in our societal framework. This, which that we went away and enjoyed. And as much as your parents or your brother or your children or whoever, they might have some stuff we go, the normal family stuff. You still go, how cool was that to spend time with my family? Experience stuff together, eat different foods. Saw Hunter spit out an oyster because he didn't know what was going on. Those are ribbing events that you'll be able to have for the next 12 months.
That's right.
Also, just seeing them in their natural event and natural environment, and just being able to experience stuff. Colby coming from the background of, in natural sciences as well. Looking at rocks and all sorts of cool stuff, and even things like seeing my parents wander through museums that were, maybe not interesting to them, but still captivated by the learning experience. And the mother-in-law, Faye, had a barrel of a time, and it was actually a little bit of a shining light for me as far as being able to, we talk about wonder, like this idea of just being excited by the moment. And she really set a great example for me over the whole time, just being, always open to the experience and enjoying of it. And that's why we're alive, right? To have those experiences with the close people around us. I think that's still the most powerful part. Like we're talking about, and we'll probably come onto that video we put together in regards to not having a housing crisis, having a homing crisis, which is Christine's line, which is so beautifully put. But I think that's more and more powerful to me as time goes on.
Similar sort of examples I felt in the family time together, and some of it was the awareness that it doesn't have to be 10 out of 10 exceptional. So just playing a game of around the dinner table after the meal has been put away, sitting there doing something simple, and and just in the company of mums, doing mum's version of it, the sister-in-law's doing her version of it, the kids come and go and do their version of it, and you go, there's no high stakes, it's just a bit of fun, but you're just seeing people in their natural true self. And then we also go and do some ludicrous, build a water slide, very workplace health and safety, unregulated, screaming down a hill into the dam, catapulting off the end. We've all done a loop of it, and then one of the volunteers pulls out a big rock like this and says, "Oh, here's one of those rocks we sent down earlier to test it." So there's some crazy done, and there's some innocent, quiet time in amongst it all. And that for me is the whole range of the being connected to your parents, connected to your family. It's not,
and also, I mean, and I think those things, and just because of the fact that we put up with stuff with our family, like obviously there's nuances with all of us that would. It says that community, and that goes on to this, the Latin term of familia, which is a household, which includes everyone in your immediate group. And I can, I pondered over the time, who could I have within a house or a household or multiple households who would enrich my life. And you go, look, there's a group of people there. I could go, wow, that would be great to be spending more real time with them, cooking dinner. And we did that while we were away, cooked too much food, as you said, and had too many drinks and played stupid games. And, people were cheating just to win on the game or whatever. But it's a serious stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think we've had a joint check in there, but I think we're both on the same page that it's never been more important for People Purpose Place to have its space in the world.
Yeah, I guess, reinforced on a daily basis with, whatever media you want to look at or whatever reports come out on the topic of housing. It's not magically going to get better. There's no momentum towards an improving situation. In fact, the momentum seems all the opposite way.
Yes.
The disconnect that a bunch of people are going to feel with their fixed term interest rates that coming off the boil this year, they're going to have their interest rate effectively double or more, so from 2% to 4% or plus. That will really put a crimp in their 90 when that comes home to the household budget. And that's just one example. I am a bit I am a bit tired of just the economic discussion on the topic, because as we highlight with our holiday and family time, that there's so much more to a beautiful life and a great relationship, and actually something of meaning than the economics of it. So I think for me, some of that is the year ahead has got much more of a leadership role, which everyone will try and break it down to what are the dollars and cents. So as we deliver Gin Road, I can imagine and can understand people saying, what are the numbers? What are the economics of this project? And we've interviewed Michael. So the financial controller has sat down and said, absolutely, it needs to make economic sense. But that's absolutely not the priority or the main win out of this project. In fact, everything but that is probably the main game. And
yeah, definitely. that probably fits very well into the problem statement which you have written down for tonight, which is with Australia actually in a homing crisis, how do we stop talking about housing?
Yeah. Yeah, and perhaps it's actually really quite simple. If we can personally imagine, be curious, and have wonder about a space where you can thrive as a human, that would go a long way. Because I suspect that more than half of the whole country have a fear, an economic fear about loss, security, tenure of their current shelter. And that's no way to live in fear all of your days about something so primal and basic.
Yeah. Yeah, 1,000%. And if you're, this is the simplest terms of what we're talking about, if you were sharing your cost of living with, 2, 3, 4, 5 other people, that's going to give you some space to get away from that terror, that idea of, oh no, I'm caught in this, I'm in a job that I don't like, or I'm running around in circles trying to do things that I don't particularly want to do under the pretext that I don't have any other option. We're stuck in this hamster wheel. And I think a lot of people, once they have that realization, they do go, oh yeah, that's a really, really bad way to be living, but we will just go back and do it. Oh, you're right. See you later. We'll just go back to that. I'll go and put in my 60 hours and see whether I can make $1 so I can get a slightly better one of those.
And at some of the really tragic human end, we see victims of DV remaining under the roof because they can't imagine anything other than staying here with this known terror as opposed to facing the unknown terror. And really this is Australia that we're talking about.
Yeah, but it's completely understandable, isn't it? Because, Maslow's pyramid says, hey, unless those things at the bottom are filled up, unless you know that you're going to a safe place to live and all of those other things and food and security and all that sort of stuff, then any of that other stuff higher in the pyramid is just about a waste of time.
You don't have the mental energy to spend thinking about what my best version of myself is. I was actually always going to be a circus clown until I didn't get the school grades. So imagine that.
Jeez.
That fruit hasn't fallen far from the tree.
I think this week, talking about this episode was really about, I suppose, summarising 2022. I think the intention of this week, this episode in particular, was to cover the year that was and look forward to covering the year that will be. And I don't know how many episodes we actually got to in the end. How many did we actually get out there?
I'm looking at 21. It might be 20 or 21, I think, because maybe I can't count so well, but that wasn't a bad effort from a zero start during 2022. I think and there's definitely some good content in there. I've had feedback from people watching it after the event, the recordings. 22 including today. Thanks, Colby. That's the official. He can count. He does school and stuff.
That's that whole schooling thing. That's pretty cool. And I think there's a lot to celebrate with that too. I know, and earlier on, now we're looking at each other with somewhat clear images. I think it's probably taken us 10 or 15 episodes to get through the technical issues and the like. So I think we've definitely gone somewhere because the content is really important, but obviously getting through those technical hurdles all part of that steps. And I think by the later episodes, being able to get in interviews was certainly a big step forward for us. And I think, those people we interviewed added really good, deep value to everything that we were trying to express as well.
Yeah, I'm a bit excited about next week in particular, but looking forward, we've definitely got some great names with valuable content to contribute.
Yes.
And so that will be awesome to see some more guests rolling out. For me, recapping on the interviews that and conversations we've had in the last year, I must again express appreciation for time with yourself and with Christine in particular, which has been really helpful to develop our thinking collectively on this topic. And mid last year, I think I had a really stark example or reminder by going to a supposed leadership industry conference in Sydney.
Yeah.
That was a really fairly uninspiring example. It struck me as very much business as usual. It's the momentum of things. We're always doing the status quo. So there's these manufacturers of things over here, and then these government and bureaucratic people telling us about the change in rules and star ratings or whatever. But there was absolutely nobody talking about people. And I think that's a major oversight in what is a fairly fundamental human issue, making great homes.
It's actually a little bit bizarre, isn't it? That we've noticed that for quite some time, and that's hence why, although we're talking about where people live in some ways, we put the word people first, but there's so few institutions that actually put people anywhere in the puzzle. Like not even like it's not even mentioned. Like it's what happens right at the end when everything else has actually occurred. So
that's how the system's designed. And I've been in that role. When I was working for a manufacturer, I was absolutely convinced everyone needed this product. This is the perfect product for you to make your house, do it, put it on your Weet-Bix, put it everywhere. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. In fact, it is sliced bread. Come and get it. Yes. But in actual fact,
yes,
talking about the human outcome still doesn't come into that manufacturer's. Today they're now talking about the Instagram outcome. So that's progression.
Yeah, right. And talking about interviewing people, we had obviously, I think Colby might have come on first. And then we got Maddie in there to have a chat, Michael Lawrence, and Oliver Jessup.
Yep.
And we got some people lined up in the new year to come in there as well. But we don't want to pick favourites. But is there anything that stood out from you in those group of people?
Well, Colby's holding the plug in the background there. I'd say Colby was absolutely my number one choice.
Yeah, good way to go with that. Yeah, absolutely.
And he's a big rig, so I mean, seriously, I want to keep on the right side of him. But in all seriousness, he just struck me as an impressive young man when interviewed, and hearing his perspective, which is clearly vastly different to my 50-something years of perspective. He's got his own view of the world, articulates it differently, uses the relationships between peer groups and how share houses works and the experience that he sees today, which makes me much more hopeful than for his input. So for having that conversation, it was really helpful for me.
Yeah, and I I got a lot from everyone actually. Like, and then one of the things that I was really, I suppose, grateful for was that every one of those interviews, they took the time to get their head around what we're trying to achieve. And all of those people coming from very different backgrounds, from Colby as a student to, Maddie in the presentation, innovation space, and Michael from that, technical financial space, and Oliver with his unique sort of almost activist view on the world and very pragmatic activism, I'd call it. They all really had very important and valuable things to add to the conversation. And I think all of them will continue that conversation with us. And hopefully, that will spread to more people, because obviously, we're only joking before that, whether it be on Twitch or whatever, there's kids there playing games and someone's videoing the screen, or, they're doing screen record while they're talking to the screen, and they got 25,000 people watching. And we're talking about changing society, and, we've got a handful of crickets. But it goes to show that even if it's the one person and it's another person and it's another person and it's another person, that if we're talking to the right people, because we have said there's no use getting everyone to have this conversation, because I don't think everyone's ready for this conversation. But I think it was really empowering for me to have different ages, different demographics, different perspectives, but people still go, look, I get it, and I think your message is important, and I think society needs to consider that change, because sometimes, and Christine does it so well, where she sort of says, she balances this, we're going into tough spaces. This isn't an easy conversation to start, and we know it's got to happen, and we know it should happen, but sometimes it feels like a lonely old adventure when we're turning around going, you get it, to another group of people. So it is good to have those conversations with other people. Go, yeah, we get it and we understand. And I'm sure you even had over the break. I had a couple of my relatives, and we were just talking around a few beers and that sort of stuff. And you have the conversation about property and the terminology and the mortgage, which means mortality. So you're engaged to your death to a home. Who wants to sign up? They're like, we're going to do what to what? So it's good to have people, open the curtains a little bit, and become somewhat aware that, hey, there's a hell of a lot more going on out there, and we're willing to be part of the conversation. So I was really chuffed by the interviews, and I'm hoping that we can continue to add a lot more over this year.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got some good indications and some quality people lining up, which is awesome. And I think we're not chasing the Instagram kind of audience or conversation. We're wanting the genuine slow burn for people who are willing to do the work to peer behind the curtain of mainstream media view of housing. What do we mean if we're saying that there's no housing crisis? What does that mean? And not everybody can pick that up.
100%, and that's probably a good segue. Maybe that we did produce that little bit of a video on what if there was no housing crisis. I wonder whether Colby, whether you can run that video now, and we can so people have a look at that as well. Speak to that, absolutely. I put him under the jump now.
What if I told you we didn't have a housing crisis? To start off with, it turns out we have more than 1 million vacant homes in Australia. What if I told you it wasn't a crisis of housing, but a homing crisis? What if that meant it was a societal issue? Why is it that we have never been so close together, but been so lonely? Why is it that we have this amazing technology that keeps us so well connected, but we are all really missing real connection? People Purpose Place is working on a better way for us to live, respecting you as an individual, connecting you.
Yeah. That's
Absolutely.
just important work right there.
Absolutely. And I think that's why it does reiterate why it's so important, because it goes beyond that housing crisis conversation. And there's no doubt, obviously that a lot of the statements in there were about getting you to think, and there's no doubt that in some ways, when you talked about, just even the economics do show a problem. There is something fractured, even with the basic preeminence understanding of housing, which accommodation. We're talking about accommodation when we say housing, not the people that are living in it. But there's no doubt that even that space around the accommodation. I don't know whether you got that screenshot there as well, Colby, when you can maybe put that up there and we can just talk to that a little bit. But this was something that came out on A Current Affair, and these things are only going to come out more often because obviously, as the only tool the government has, or the Reserve Bank has, to manage inflation is to obviously crank interest rates, and that's the only tool to stop spending. Now, it's a bit counterintuitive, and there's things that you can't not buy, which I still have some issues with that as a tool, because you can't not buy fuel, and if fuel's gone up, well then you just have to fuel inflation while you're buying fuel. But this was talking about close to half of Australian homeowners are under mortgage stress, showing more than 45% of households are spending more than they are earning. Now, I think that article is maybe 4 months old. Was that about right?
Yeah, I think, August last year, I reckon, is the timing on it.
So, there's going to be more interest rate increases.
Correct.
Beyond that. And I already see we've had 3 successive months of house prices dropping. And I only just before, this is probably very localized data, but I had a look at the Townsville dashboard for housing starts, and November and December just passed are the lowest housing starts that I can find.
Wow.
So that's, right the way back to the ugly years, which for Townsville was, say, maybe 15, 16. We were still doing more permits for new homes in November and December than what we did last year.
Wow.
I think there was 12 and 22 were the numbers.
They're not some good numbers, but we're also seeing that in labour availability and quote suppliers getting numbers back. So
yes,
12 months ago you would have to scream and kick and jump up and down and badger people to get a price for, I want some timber decking, or I want somebody whatever. First of all, they couldn't get it as a supply, so there is none, so good luck with that. And then when they could get it, they had to naturally sell it to the people who could afford the highest price and existing relationships, etc., etc. Now we're finding that you put out a tender for pricing, and it's pretty promptly responded to. Reasonable timeframes. Hey, we have some of that on the shelf. Now the price may not have returned to pre-COVID levels, but they aren't crazy out of control pricing.
No.
And
I don't think we can ever go back there. Globalism is probably the way, between the war going on and supply chains completely fractured, that and instability from China and a few other places, which we don't necessarily know all of that picture, but it certainly says that we're not going to get back to pre-COVID pricing. But you're right in saying that there seems to be definitely a great appetite, at least, for people to be more, at least more responsive and more capable of having the conversation. So, yeah, and I've got to, without naming and shaming people that we're going to talk to, is it possible to probably say, look, we're hoping to get these people in to have a conversation, and things may not align, things may align. But on our hit list, who've you sort of, trying to get along to have a chat with?
So we've had a great relationship with Professor Anne Steinemann, who's actually a world-renowned leader around healthy indoor environments. So she's got some more time available to do these sort of things, and is keen to do a podcast with us. So maybe that's next week, which would be awesome. And secondly, Australia had a contingent head over to Canada at the back half of last year to talk about getting to net zero carbon in housing. And one of the very few people representing Australia was a Dr. Wendy Miller. And we've again had a long-term relationship with Wendy Miller. And she's a bit more time available. So it would be awesome to get, I haven't got a definite time for Wendy, but I think Professor Steinemann will be next week, which would be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And obviously, Dr. Wendy has had extensive experience, particularly in building fabric,
Yes.
and understanding of, what star rating is and what it actually is versus how it's modeled, what that looks like, all of those things. And that's, that's awesome to be able to get her feedback in there as well.
Yeah.
And I'm also keen to get, Matty back again, because obviously with his eye for that communication piece and someone who is readily understanding also that he's a young family that made the conscious decision that they want someone to raise their children. So the idea of having someone at home is important for them. So they're actively trying to make that happen. But that means you don't have two people to go and get alone, which makes it very difficult for you to go out there and buy a house in its own right. So, and Dr. Malcolm Holtz, who we've had lots of experiences with over the last couple of years, obviously a planner by background, but also a musician, and a great communicator, and someone with a unique perspective and some experience in the space of looking at what alternative housings could be. I mean, I will love to have that chat. We'll probably be corrected in our definitions on stuff, which I love, having that engagement with Malcolm. And we also talked about maybe, and they probably haven't even heard this, so they might hear it secondhand, but Ben and Laura Cooper, which is Cooper Constructions, here in Townsville, a young couple who've got a building business, and but have a unique perspective on life and see, this idea of having collective housing or a reduced cost of future or whatever being worthwhile things to hold out there. So I'm really excited to get more people along and to continue the conversation, and I think that maybe even leads on to some other milestones that we maybe are hoping to get out in the near future or the medium future or sometime in the future. What sort of stuff have we got to roll out this year for everyone to continue their experience and their learning adventures?
I guess the major one is People Purpose Place is about to have a dedicated website. So that'll be, it's actually, the infrastructure exists and we're just populating it at the moment, which will be more, it'll be a natural place to show our case study project. So the actual delivery of Ginn Road will have its own dedicated page, and future projects would be the natural place for them to go into that website. So that is pretty exciting. It's a work in progress, as these things often are.
I'm also excited with the website to be able to start to talk about the toolbox. So, sometimes I think the hard part is we talk a little bit in vagaries and you don't sort of quite get your head around exactly what are these People Purpose Place people doing. But if we talk in rough round terms, we know that for housing to be affordable, sharing probably has to be a function of it, right?
Yep.
We know from the learnings and the experiences we had that people have in the modern world, we have a very strong sense of ourself. So we're honoring the fact that people will want to be individuals, as I do, as you do. But we also all have this longing to be connected in community. So how do we balance those things so that when we say, okay, we've made a conscious decision that for me to have my best life, both from an affordability point and an enriched point of view, that I need to look at this idea of a shared housing model. How is it compliant? How is it done correctly and legally? And how does it make Michael Lawrence sense, which is financial? And the most important thing that I think we can bring forward with the website is our toolbox. So we don't expect that to happen. Okay, ta-da! Everyone's now really good friends. We know that doesn't work, and I think that was originally one of our biggest fears, wasn't it? We know the building bit. We know, and even it's been great to go back now that we're doing. Ginroad's going through a process. We had this bit of a situation where we had to explain to a standard certifier, we're building this house, a dwelling under the code. We're building it for this household. It's, the household is not determined yet, but we're building it for a household, a unified group of people who are living together here as a household. And they understood that. And that was great that we are able to jump over that. But then we've got the human toolbox, right? So we know the building bit. We know the numbers make sense. We know that it's legal. We know that it can be compliant. And now we need to say, how do we all, and we're going on that experience ourselves as much as anyone else, which is how do we embrace what we need to do to be better humans so we can be better as a group, so that then that group can be better functioning and deal with what are the normal extents of life, but still honor your ability to be a human and be on your journey to be the best human. So I'm excited to start talking about the toolbox and to start getting out and experimenting with that. We've always said that it's not all of the answers. I mean, even Dr. Malcolm in the last week talking about using writing or journaling in a small space as a way to build your creative energy and come up with really good writing. Said that writing, even as an individual or as a group, might be a powerful focusing tool. And we laughed that, he mentioned around a fireplace doing those things, and we laughed at the Latin word for focus is actually hearth, which means history has been yelling to us and we're just not listening, right? Like these words are sitting right there in front of us. Focus, hearth. Oh, you mean we can all sit together there and
tell our story, articulate our story for the next generation.
Yeah. Awesome. And that
would it make sense?
Even just sitting into that just feels good, doesn't it? Like even just imagining that scene, you go, that's what we need to be doing more of.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think some other milestones there I noticed, which are probably is also the fact that we want to get our workshops out on the road. And I know you've experimented a little bit down in your area, but we've been working on how those workshops might be, and we're thinking around the topic of tough conversations around homing or housing, and how we can take people on the journey to break down a little bit of their pre-existing biases, to open their eyes and engage in this really interesting conversation. And if the worst thing that happened, people come along and sit through 10 weeks of conversation and they go, well, that was really cool. I learned a lot, and I had some really good conversation, and I had some interesting, mind benders in the way I think about the world and my place in it. And if they walk away and they're just more informed, well, we've still done our job, haven't we?
Great outcome. Yes, absolutely.
And if the 20% or 10% say, look, I not only hear your message and I not only hear what you're saying, but it resonates with me enough to go, well, what do I do next?
Yeah, I've got 3 mates and we go camping every Easter together, and we have these common values and kids at the same stage. How do we manage that? It's
And I mean,
almost,
something that even happened as an experience. I mean, without talking too personal, obviously my wife Jane has an autoimmune diseases, and we went to Tasmania during that time of year, and it was a relief for her to be in a cold environment rather than the tropics. So in an ideal world, and this is just blue sky mining, if I could find a way that I could still go and do work and do those things, but could swap with someone in a cooler climate for 4 or 5 months of a year, and that might be Tasmania, and then we still have a smaller place somewhere else, and literally you could move around, because I'm sure there's lots of people going, I don't want to be here through this cold period. If I go somewhere where the barramundi are jumping out of the trees, and I can go and swim in a jungle creek, which is also amazing, which I love, but for health reasons, if we were able to find that balance and start those conversations. Who else has got rheumatoid arthritis in the tropics and wants to look at an alternative way of doing things? And we even found from our conversation with Christine, there can be a lot of synergy and a lot of trust and a lot of compassion built by having those conversations with like-minded people. So
exactly.
It's very, very powerful. So I'm hopeful that those workshops will bring about good conversation, which make people engaged, and that probably leads to another milestone, which is obviously continuing on the journey to see whether we can get Gin Road as a physical thing. I think that would be an enormous outcome for this year if we could make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. The workshops and those conversations are going to be ongoing, and more of that happening. Less talking about things, more talking about relationships. And I think relationships where humans thrive it's just a no-brainer, but we have got busy with our existence and life and the enterprise of doing things rather than taking that time to smell the roses and what's the best version of our life. The Gin Road project is going to be exciting to see come to fruition. One is just, getting your hands on the tools and smashing my finger with a hammer. Well, that's all part of it.
That's mandatory, yeah, absolutely.
Mandatory. But also seeing it delivered and how people approach it and start their own home could be very cool. And I'm quite confident that there's a few other projects bubbling away. We've had some conversations within the Housing Older Women's Network, and older women tend to network and communicate pretty damn well. They'll call you a muppet if you're a muppet. So there's no, they're quite good at being the explicit and very open. And it might take several conversations to get it there, but they don't leave stones unturned and not address stuff, which is awesome. I think there's those bubbling along as well.
And I think something else which we touched on a little bit earlier as well, with having a problem statement and an intent for today's meeting, is also to relook at the rules and stuff that we have inside that, and we're learning all the time. And one of the things we've realised is that having the idea that there's a high level of trust and confidentiality within those conversations means that we can adventure into spaces that would normally not be open for everyday conversation, but do form part of what makes these things enriching, So those other projects, I think, will all go at their own speed, and I'm pretty sure in this year we'll probably see something pop out of the woodwork where someone says, let's just go ahead and make this happen. And that I get the feeling like that's going to occur this year. So, yeah, I mean, that's probably, I think we've probably covered a lot of what we needed to for tonight. Do you feel like we've met our intent, which is to sort of cover the year that was and look forward to the year that will be?
I think so. We surprisingly enough, we've covered, filled a fair bit of airtime, and I do hope it's of value and people are able to pick up bits of it at your own speed. 2023's a full year, so we really only started this in May 2022. So it wasn't actually a full year of People Purpose Place. And I think we can be fairly happy with progress and where we're sitting, but invite anyone to come on board and have these conversations along the way.
And I think one thing that I'd just like to add there, and it's probably I'll also reiterate that when Christine is certainly back, but I also would like to extend a big thanks of gratitude for going on this journey with both of you, and particularly yourself. It's enriching, it's challenging, it's difficult, all of those things, but I think it's worthwhile. And if I had something to come out of 2022, it would be gratitude to going through it with humans that I admire and respect, and think that the challenges are worth facing, because there's some good things that come out of it. So thank you, and thank Christine for being part of that journey. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise, mate. I have enormously appreciated it, and the opportunity to take on big challenges in company is how you want to do it. No one wants to do this stuff on their own, but if you've got a wingman or a Christine to sort of correct your thinking from time to time, that's enormously helpful to take on awkward conversations with family or whatever it is that you feel daunted by. Surprisingly enough, we're all human, and we have these same idiosyncrasies running around in the person next to us.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Awesome. Perfect. I think we're probably good to wrap it up there. We've got a guest lined up for next week, so this will be episode 23, I understand.
Yes.
With Professor Anne Steinemann. So that will be awesome to have her in the loop.
And what's her background? So from a conversation point of view, what should we expect to be talking about?
It so happens that her background is a civil engineer and has been working on public infrastructure for nearly 40-year working life.
Yes.
And most recently has been focused around healthy air and built form environment.
Yes.
As professorship at, she's an associate professor now for Melbourne University and James Cook University. And she's progressing her own audience for healthy home solutions. She's finding there's a growing portion of our population who are excluded from regular housing because they are sensitive to built homes. So the glues, the EMF, the mold, all of these background contaminants that once you get to a sensitivity stage, it's probably you've cooked your goose, so to speak, and you can never get comfortable in most housing again. And that's so she's got a small group emerging, really keen. How do we do that for that sort of demographic?
That sounds like an exciting conversation. Look forward to it.
Yeah. So we've already been speaking to some of those people individually, and there seems to be a group sort of arising around that topic.
That's awesome. Look forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you for your time again on a Monday evening.
Yes, thank you very much.
Namaste.
Thanks, Speak soon. See you later.